Hey everybody, it's Paul Ramsey with another NGH 2017 pre-convention interview. We're doing these in support of the August convention, and I'm lucky today to be joined by William Horton, who he's just telling me he's been apparently around a long time. You said this is going to be what, your 30th year?
30th year, yes sir.
30th year, that's awesome. That is so great. William, can I call you Will? Is that
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
Will is presenting on Sunday at 2 o'clock, Freedom from Compulsive Habits, Hypnosis and NLP for Alcohol and Drug Issues. And this is another one that, Will, you said you've been doing this one a long time, right?
I think it's my 27th year teaching the addictions or compulsive habits. Yes.
That's great. That's great. So give us a little rundown, Will. I mean, again, decades of experience here for people to draw from. How'd you get into our world? Why aren't you a plumber or a lawyer?
Well, like a lot of people, I've always been fascinated with it. The first time I hypnotized somebody was in high school, and I read a book. It was called Hypnosis for Change. I think it's still in publication. It used to be a yellow book. And I remember I got it, and it had a little script, and I read it to somebody, and they were hypnotized and scared me to death. I didn't know what to do with them once I got them hypnotized. But it was fascinating to me because it goes back to one of the movies that influenced me was the original Manchurian Candidate.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that was so cool. And then there was a movie nobody remembers. It was called The Hot Rock with Robert Redford and George Segal. And they used hypnosis to hypnotize somebody. Basically, it was to rob a bank. But I still remember that the guy was standing in an elevator, and he was looking at, as the numbers changed, a person came in and started doing what we know now as an induction. Look, as the numbers change, 1, you get more relaxed, 2, and I thought it was brilliant. So that's when I went and bought the book. And I hypnotized somebody. Like I said, it scared me. So I did make some self-hypnosis tapes because it said how to do this back in the days when you still had, in fact, actually it was reel-to-reel tapes. Cassettes hadn't even been around yet. And so anyway, I did that. But like a lot of people, it was high school, it was the early 70s. It got put on the back burner. I didn't think anything more of hypnosis till many years later when I was battling an addiction, and I went through treatment and the 12-step program. I'm still active in the 12-step program, and it helped, but I was having, shall we say, some challenges with staying on the path.
Sure.
And then I stumbled across somebody who did what we know now as hypnosis and NLP, and everything started to make sense. And I thought, this is wonderful. So I became an alcohol and drug counselor. This is in the early, 81. And everything else has been going since. So that's how I kind of got into this world. And I go back so long that when I first got into the world of hypnosis and NLP, there was really no formal training for hypnosis. When you talk to a lot of the old people in hypnosis, how they got into it was like how I did in the 70s. They read a book and just started doing it.
Yeah.
Now there's structure and there's classes and everything. And I went to my first conference it was probably about 87 or 88. Was whatever first year they did it at Nashua, New Hampshire.
Oh, okay.
And I've been going every year since. So that's my little story. And of course I got into the NLP with the hypnosis. And one of my passions always is doing this for addictions. In fact, I've run inpatient units, outpatient units. As you know, I'm also a psychologist and a master certified addiction professional.
Right.
So, it's one of my passions.
So, God, that's amazing. And I just keep thinking about.
And today, since you're interviewing me today on St. Patrick's Day, it's also my 33rd year of being clean and sober.
Wow.
So
Larry Bird and the Celtics and sobriety. It all comes together.
Great day for an Irishman to quit drinking. St. Patrick's
That's
Day.
great. That's great. What do you think, I think at the surface level, this question may seem strange, not strange, almost shallow at first, but bear with me. It's obvious what the value of taking a class like this is. But when you think about, you've got so much experience, you've been doing this for so long. When people come and they spend this time with you doing this topic, what do you think the value is for people who come and spend this time with you?
Well, I think it's twofold. One is, as hypnotists and helpers, we're always dealing with people with habit control, whether it's weight, you could be smoking and things like that. And then some people say they don't want to deal with addictions. But in some ways, if you do a lot of weight loss or you work with smoking, obviously, you've already opened the door to addictions. But the interesting thing, and what I focused on the last few years, is what's the difference between a bad habit and an addiction? I mean, it's parsing a fine line, I will admit, but still, there's some things we need to look at. And of course, as the Guild says, we want to be careful with our language about whether we use addiction or things like that. Of course, I'm a psychologist. I can pretty much say, but for most people, I can understand that. But again, in the general population, when people come in, they don't know if they have an addiction or do they just have a bad habit. And some of the recent research that points out to some of the neurochemical basis of addictions, and just like the neurochemical basis of hypnosis and how it affects our neurology is rather fascinating. So one of the things I like to do and teach in my little 2 hour that we do is, what's the difference? How can you tell the difference? And what are some of the things you can notice? And of course, number one, I always say there's two main things. One is if a person has a bad habit and they want to quit, it's usually easier for them to quit. If they have a bad habit and they say they want to quit and then they keep doing the bad habit, well, now that's the kind of people we get the phone call, right? Whatever we're dealing with. Because every day people stop smoking, stop drinking, change their diet, start working out, do all the things that they pay us money to help them do, but we're dealing with that group that can't do it. So, and if you continue doing a behavior where there's negative repercussions, that lets you know there's a problem. I like to say people come in, especially for alcohol or drug things, it's one of the 4 L's, right? That's what drives you into getting help. Your lover, your liver, your livelihood, or the law. People don't just usually wake up and go, it's a beautiful day, I think I'll quit drinking, right? The Patriots won the Super Bowl. I'm going to, celebrate by never drinking beer again. Most people don't do that. Their wife yells at them. Their boss is yelling at them. They got a DUI, or there's other repercussions. So it's one of the 4 L's. And when that happens, if you don't have a problem, and I always say you could get a DUI and not be an alcoholic. But if you ever got a DUI and you're not an alcoholic, I guarantee you would never drink and drive again. It would be off the table. But if, 3 months later, it won't matter this time, I've only had 2, that lets you know there's a problem, right?
Right.
So, and again, the other interesting thing I love talking about in this little 2 hours, I give a little background on the 12-step program, because unless you're in it, you really don't understand it. And there's a whole miscommunication with a lot of people about what is the 12-step program really. And I always say it was meant, if you read the old literature, it was meant to be a bridge back to normal living. It was never intentionally meant to be a life in and of itself. Now, some people make it a life. I mean, it gives them a purpose, a passion, a mission, and good for you. It gives you something to do. But for some people, it doesn't have to be. And then the other thing I always flip out there is, especially in our little world of hypnosis and NLP, usually someone will say, but you're labeling yourself. You're labeling yourself if you keep saying you're an addict or an alcoholic. And it says you're powerless. If you really, and this is where people don't understand, even people in the 12-step program, it never says you're powerless. In the 12-step program, and I'll use the Alcoholics Anonymous one, it says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Our lives had become unmanageable. And as a language guy, neurolinguistics, those are past tense.
Right.
It doesn't mean I am powerless. It means I was.
Right.
And the old literature pointed out that while you're drinking, even if you're a normal drinker, if you have a few drinks, your willpower goes way down, right? That's why we do stupid things when we're drinking. So I kind of give an overview, and then I do give some tips on how to work with people with addictions. And of course, I share when you probably should tell people to reach out for some more professional help. Maybe go to detox, maybe go to treatment.
Sure.
Things like that.
Cool. So tell me about, I mean, again, I just get, I think, gosh, 27 years you've been teaching this and you got such a wealth of experience. Tell me about a learning breakthrough that you experienced as you were like really committing to this track of professional development, something that really helped accelerate your learning or your efficacy, something like that would be cool.
Well, and one is, it's been rather recent, and I call it the HOT model. And I use the HOT model of hypnosis and the HOT model of neurolinguistics. And what it is you have three levels of, you operate in three levels of thought, right? And the first level of thought is you're in the experience, like I am hungry or I am angry. When you're in the experience, the only thing you can do is the experience, right? It's there. The second level of thought is you pull back and you say, I notice I'm having the thought, I'm hungry or I'm angry. And then the highest level of thought that we know of is I notice I'm having the thought that I'm thinking about that I'm hungry or I'm angry or whatever it happens to be. So there's these three levels of disassociation.
Right.
Once I started to look at that, it reframed everything about hypnosis and NLP like that, because a lot of our inductions, we take people into the experience. That's what a progressive relaxation is. Other hypnosis techniques pulls you out of it, like Ericksonian hypnosis, where you drift out of it. So we're constantly going in and out. But when you're in an addiction or a bad habit, you're stuck in the experience. So it's hard to get out of it because all you can see is the experience.
Right.
But when you pull back, and if you make a change back here and you settle back into the experience, it's different. And when you look at a lot of our look at the really old hypnosis scripts, it's constantly doing this, and it gives you a framework of how to do it. So there's that. And so once I did that, I go, whoa, this makes so much sense. And so like you'll see people, and in therapy it does this. I mean, it gives me a different framework. And the other thing is I call it the happy rat study. And this changed everything with me. And what it was is back in what started the war on drugs, they did a study. They took a couple of rats. This is what psychologists do, is torture rats. And they got these rats hooked on, I think it was cocaine first and then heroin. And they've done it with other drugs. And then they show the rat and it's in the cage and it's all spazzed out on the drugs. And then they drop in, if it's a male rat, like a female rat, ignores the female, keeps doing the drugs, drops in food, ignores it, boom. So it started the whole war on drugs, where they talked about one drug or drugs are so powerful, that you'll avoid food and mating and da-da. So it started this whole zero tolerance toward drugs. Okay, interesting. But then some psychologists looked at it and go, well, there's a challenge here. First of all, rats are very social creatures, and they're very smart. If you ever dealt with rats, you know what I'm talking about. I live in Florida. We got fruit rats at this one house I had, right? And so it's hard. They're smart. So what they did is they took the rat, they got it hooked on drugs again, but instead of dropping stuff in, they took the rat out of the cage, put it in a happy rat cage where there's females and males, whatever, and food and stimulation mentally, because rats are smart.
Yeah.
And then all the rats, or almost all the rats, probably 99% of them, wouldn't use the drugs or the alcohol if it was right in front of them. Right? They became happy rats. And this coincided with, at the end of the Vietnam War, probably before your time, they were gearing up for this huge onslaught of addicted soldiers. Because in Vietnam, and that's when I was in, there was heroin, there was hashish, there was marijuana, a lot of drinking, because people were unhappy. It was an unpopular war. And if you were there, you were 18 to 22, you couldn't come home and talk about it. Nobody wanted to hear about it. So you were unhappy. So all these troops were addicted, as we would call them now, if you look at the clinical definition. So they geared up for this problem. But what happened was most of the soldiers, probably 90 to 95% of the soldiers, sailors, air and marine, when they got out of Vietnam and they came back into the country with an adjustment period, 90 to 95% of them never experienced the addictive cycle again.
Wow.
So it's like, this is interesting. So it's like, it's the rat cage. If you're in an unhappy environment and I pull you out and put you in a happy environment, you're going to do well. And for addictions, this made me realize why I could take somebody out of like New Hampshire, where you happen to be. If you were like, you needed treatment, and I bring you down here to Florida and I put you in a treatment center and everybody's loving you and giving you nurturing and care. And you're like, I'm doing great. But then we pull you out of that cage, drop you back into your old cage where you've got your old friends and your boss is yelling at you, your spouse is mad at you, and then people relapse.
Wow.
So it made me flip. And when I see people really recover, and that made me relook at all the addiction stuff, when I see people really recover, they redo their own cage, if you will. So they get happy where they are, make the changes where they have to, and then they can truly recover. So that changed everything. It's kind of like when as hypnotists, we work with weight loss. I've worked with, 15,000 weight loss clients probably. And same thing. It's like if they change how they react in their environment, and we can use it with the hypnosis and do some structural changes, get the cookies out, get the ice cream out, then they're much more likely to be successful. So those two kind of things just made me look at the whole world of recovery much differently.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's so cool. That's great. So we just flew through that time. We've covered it. That's it. You guys remember, Will is on Sunday at 2:00, Freedom from Compulsive Habits, Hypnosis and NLP for alcohol and drug issues. You're going to learn the addictions process. You're going to discover the medical disease model. You're going to he's going to explain the cycle of recovery to you, and you're going to learn a lot. Will, if people want to learn more about you and what you do, what's a good way for them to do that?
Well, the easiest, of course, read the Journal of Hypnotism. I'm the second oldest, longest serving, I can't say oldest, longest person writing in the Journal of Hypnosis. I'm up there with Dwight and Jerry Valley. So I always have articles in there. Call the Guild, or you can get a hold of me at if you go to www.nfnlp.com. That's nfnlp.com. That stands for National Federation of Neurolinguistic Programming, which is the organization I started that trains people in this. So you could go there and get all kinds of information.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time, man. I look forward to seeing you in August.
All right. See you then.
All right. Take care.